So welcome to the Model Officers YouTube channel. As you probably know by now, on the 25th of July, I was invited to Airfix headquarters as a creator. And this is the award in which they presented us. There was 8 of us there. One of the things I wanted to get out there really quickly was the exciting news of the Avro Anson Mark 1 that is almost ready to come out to the public. It's a fantastic model. I've held it, I've looked at it, looked over it. It looks absolutely amazing. I think it's probably one of Airfix's finest that they've done. It's on pre-order right now on the website for $46.99, and I got to be honest with you, it's well worth the money. The detail is superb. The clear parts and the amount of glass on this particular aircraft is phenomenal. So the cockpit detail is obviously got to be 100% crisp, and there's loads in there, absolutely loads. Just a really remarkable build. I think it's going to go down really well in the community, and basically what we did, we had a couple of presentations, and one of them was from the main designers, Matt at Airfix, and he went through the whole process of how they come to the conclusion, the initial concept, the initial idea, where it all come from, etc. So I could sit here and explain it all to you with my hands on camera, but to be honest, it's probably best way to understand everything would be for his own words and his own presentation. So bear with me, it is a little long, but to be honest, it's well worth the watch. Trust me, it really is.
So I just want to put some of the things that Luke has been talking about into context with the Avro Anson project, and then go a bit further into how the product design process works. So this is going to be focused on the Avro Anson, which is a big new release for this year, not far off from being released. Coming along, this is going to be the new box art for the Anson. I think you're some of the first guys to see it, so it's quite a famous event where a 500 squadron aircraft successfully fought away several Messerschmitt 109s, claimed a couple of kills. That's going to be the A scheme on our kit. So, Avro Anson, the aircraft itself, bit of background. This project actually came into our heads about 5 years ago. There were some absolutely stunning photos published in, was it Aeroplane magazine, which Martin put on my desk and said, have a look at that. So it was Bill Reed's Anson that he flies in New Zealand. And I think it just sort of inspired us to say, actually, that's a subject that we could revisit and make something really lovely. So the aircraft first flew in 1935, quite innovative for its time. It's based on a design for a small airliner, developed for military use. First aircraft in RF service with retractable undercarriage. So for its time, it was quite cutting edge, although it was quite quickly sort of surpassed. Used for loads of different things. Originally designed as a sort of coastal patrol and light bomber, but then it really found its niche as a trainer. So lots of bomber command crews were trained on Ansons. Used for coastal patrol. There was an ambulance version. Lots of use as a liaison aircraft, and they made thousands of these. So it was over 11,000 aircraft, and it was still in service up to the 1970s. So a really popular aircraft, and it's got a beautiful big windows in the side of the cabin, so we can really go to town on the interior. So this isn't a new subject for Airfix. It's been in the range in the smallest 1 to 72nd scale since 1962. Been released lots of times, lots of different box arts. This header card I actually found in my dad's collection. My uncle actually built it as a young boy, and managed to keep the instructions all this time. So we going back to the subject, but in 1 to 48th, which gives us a lot more scope for extra detail and really bring it to life. So to start our sort of overview of the R&D process, obviously going back to what Luke was saying, these are some of the drawings that we managed to obtain. This project was actually started in 2020 in sort of peak COVID lockdown. So it's and it was before we had Luke in the team, so I was kind of flying a little bit blind on this. So after sort of reaching out to lots of different museums and the average and archive centres, I actually found a really nice set of original drawings in Australia. So massive thanks to the Neil Aviation Heritage Centre. They were super helpful, really got on board with our project, and they shared all of their drawings that they've been using to restore their aircraft over there. Also supplied us with some brilliant manuals. So you can see there's some great examples of sort of like the internal structure of the tail, mechanical details, how the thing goes together, which really helps us to build a much more authentic model. Obviously, you've got the scan that gives us the external shape. It's not so great on sort of internal detail, so info like this is absolutely invaluable. Also really important, period photos. What you see in a museum or what you see flying at an air show often isn't quite authentic to what we're trying to make a model of. So we sort of amass these massive collections of period photographs so that we can really sort of zoom in on specific areas and work out exactly what's going on. A good example is the image down the bottom here of how the exhaust system works. On a lot of drawings you find in books, that's not drawn correctly at all. So it led to a lot of head scratching, and we sort of ended up going a different way to how a lot of the drawings in books show it. So, and then of course we've got the laser scan. So we managed to, literally a week or two before lockdown in 2020, we managed to get out to Duxford, scan their aircraft. So there's some sort of quite nice pictures of zoomed in on the scan. It sort of even reveals details like the sort of leather gaiters on the undercarriage, the fins on the oil coolers, some of the surface details, the plywood skin. So it really helps us a lot with the scan. It's not all good news with the scan though. Thing with the aircraft in Duxford is it was still flying up to the 70s and had quite a lot of modifications to it. One of the things was it's been fitted with the metal tail, which isn't what we wanted to represent. So we've gone back to using manufacturer's drawings to make sure we've got the right tail. It's also had a fiberglass nose fitted, because I think it was being used as for aerial photography. So it had a big bubble nose fitted to it, and they've put a fiberglass nose which isn't quite the right shape. So we've had to go back and correct that in our model. So we've gone away from the scan, tried to make it closer to how it should have been in the 1940s. And it's also got, you have to be really careful when you look at things like surface detail. So the stitching at the bottom there, that should have a cover tape over the top. And it's one of those things, it's only when you sort of really zoom in carefully on period photos, you realise that that's not how it should be, and that's not how we want to represent it on the model kit. So there's a lot of sort of, the scan is great, but you need a lot of background info to go with it. So all of that information is combined together. Luke puts us together a design brief, and then from here we can go ahead and start developing a product that we can put on the shelves. So with the Anson, there's been a lot of questions, are you doing this option and that option? So to get that nailed down, we're going to be doing 2 different types of engine cowling. So we've got sort of a wider time span of aircraft we can do colour schemes for. We're going to be putting 2 roof parts in, so we can do it with and without the upper turret. 2 different windscreen options, various different types of aerials to go on the roof. So some of them had a big round RDF aerial, some of them had this rugby ball shaped thing, so we've got all that covered. And then there's sort of various different options for windows and lights, things like that. So we've covered off loads of different options. So when we get into the sort of nitty gritty of the actual design process, first thing I did, get some sort of internal sort of foundation structure laid out. So this is looking at the original manufacturer's drawings and then reinterpreting them from 2D into 3D. There's 4 designers in the team. We've all got different ways of working, but I really love subjects like this where you can really get into the sort of engineering of the real aircraft, and sort of I absolutely love looking at all the sort of 70, 80-year-old engineering drawings. I find it sort of absolutely fascinating. So they can sort of see how this internal fuselage structure sort of sits inside the sort of wood and canvas fairings, and that's what actually carries all the loads that go through the aircraft. On top of that, I can then lay the scan data. So because I've got all that internal structure, I can make sure that the scan is scaled correctly. Also, some aircraft in museums, they're not quite the shape they're meant to be. Certainly the first aircraft we went down the 3D scanning route in 2013 was a Heinkel 111, which is in a museum in Norway. That aircraft was salvaged from the top of the mountain, essentially. And it, for all intents and purposes, in the museum, looks fantastic. I've done a lovely job of restoring it. When you get the scan into a CAD package and start plotting out what the true geometry of the wings and fuselage should be, you can see that where it's crashed, the whole airframe is just completely distorted, and it's really very asymmetrical. So we sort of gives us an opportunity to correct all of that and make sure that we're looking at something that's the right shape. So the scan data that Luke produces, that comes in as millions of tiny little triangles, which isn't a format we can use to sort of drive CNC tooling. It's great if you want to make a film or an animation, but not good for sort of engineering use. So we have to start reverse engineering those triangular faceted surfaces into nice smooth parametric surfaces, which can be used to make the tools. So here we are, we're sort of starting to lay out the blue curves. So we're basically using the 3D scanners to trace over, and then we can lay those. That makes almost like a wireframe, which we can then lay on the nice smooth surfaces over the top. We have to do that twice because you've got the outside of the part which you can see. Obviously, moulded parts have to have a thickness, so you have to make that inside surface as well, so that you can make the other side of the mould.
So that purple that you can see, that's the CAD.
Yeah, so the purple surfaces is what is going to become the model kit. So once we've got all our surfaces defined, we can start breaking that down into the actual parts that will be put together into the model. So the way our CAD works is we have a top level, what we call a skeleton, and that contains all the geometry we'll need, and then that geometry can be filtered down into individual parts. And the idea is we can make a change at the top level, and without changing the parts, they can be regenerated, and they'll all regenerate together, so that you don't end up with sort of misalignment between parts. So if you change the shape of one part, then the part next to it will update as well. That's the idea. Doesn't always work quite that smoothly. So all these surfaces that have been collected together can then be merged and combined into basically a sort of shell. If you imagine a hollow eggshell that forms both sides of the parts, and that is then what we call solidified, which converts the surfaces into basically a slightly different format within the CAD software, so you can start putting all the panel lines, rivet detail, things like that on. So obviously we've gone from here. We're still missing the big wing fillet, which is so distinctive on the Anson. So we're starting to refine the shape. Once we've got that to a place that we're happy with, we can then start putting all things like panel lines, rivet details, like sort of little blisters, bulges, where you've got raised panels. So all of those little details have to be added individually. And obviously we're using all of the drawings and scan data as a reference. There's also quite a lot of engineering involved. Obviously, the parts got to fit together. They've also got to be able to be injection molded. So we've got various tools so we can sort of analyse the parts, make sure that there's no undercuts, make sure that the part isn't too thick or too thin. Obviously, the plastic will shrink or it won't fill the mould up properly. So we have to do this for every part, and obviously some of the bigger kits you could have up to 600 parts, so it can take quite a long time. Once we've got all the external parts laid out, we can really start fleshing out the details. So one of the lovely things about the Anson is this brilliant cabin, and at 48 scale you've got enough space to really put a lot into it, and you've got some nice flat glazing so you can see into it really clearly. One of the things I really love about the Anson as a subject is the sort of relationship that the crews had with it. Obviously, you've got the training for the navigators, training for radio operators, training for the bomb aimers, and they're all the guys that went on to fly missions in Lancasters, Halifaxes, aircraft like that. So having the sort of the individual crew stations where it's so clear what each person was doing, I thought that was a lovely aspect of this model. So we're adding parts to show the details we think are going to be most important. So we've got the sort of little angle poised lamp there, which you think, oh, that's such a small detail, but it's right next to the window. So it's one of the first things you see. So that sort of warranted being its own part. And from there, the parts breakdown sort of grows by itself. We don't set out to say, oh, the kit has got to have exactly 250 parts. It grows by itself when you sort of get into looking at how the details work together. Obviously, we've got quite a lot of parts in the engines as well, because they're in this course with quite big cowlings. You can see quite a lot of them. And then you've got external details. The Anson was quite unique because it's got quite a lot of different types of surface texture. You've got I think there's magnesium sheeting around the nose, you've got the canvas on the fuselage, and then there's plywood on the wing. So figuring out how to represent all of those different surface textures was quite a challenge. We've gone for, on the wings where you've got the plywood, we've gone for a very similar effect to what we've done on the Hellcat and Typhoon, and to an extent the Spitfire. So it's just like as subtle as we can, just like a sort of very subtle stressed skin effect over the wings, sort of contrast with the other textures on the model. And these are just some illustrations of some of the surface details we've gone to. We've got the sort of the raised sort of reinforcing plate around the guns. We've got the sort of where you can see the representation of the internal framework in the tail and the elevators. So it's a really lovely project to work on. A lot of interesting little things. Once that design work's all finished, for bigger projects, we can be working on the same project for sort of 12 to 18 months. Once we've got it to a stage where we've got a whole set of parts, we then go to rapid prototyping. So in the room just on the other side of that wall, we've got a really nice SLA printer set up with all the curing station, parts washer. We can piece by piece print all the individual parts of the kit, put them together, make sure they work okay, and then if we're feeling that the parts aren't assembling right or they're too tricky, or sometimes you can end up in a situation in CAD where it's like a sort of chicken and egg where you can't assemble something nicely. So we can like go back, modify CAD files, print it out again, and make sure it's all up to scratch before we go into the tooling process. So that is actually the printer we've got, I think. And then just to illustrate where we are with the Anson, these are finished CAD. So we've got nice blistered engine cowlings. Got nice turret detail. The glazing on this, you see the moulded parts later, but the glazing on it's come out really nice and crystal clear. So we're really happy with that. Some internal detail. The model actually, you build the internal framework first, so you end up with a really nice little sub-assembly that sits inside the fuselage. And some of the sort of engine detail and the undercarriage. So then the next stage is actually making the moulds. All our moulds at the moment are made in China. We work really closely with the mould makers, so we do have quite a big say in how the moulds work. we send them a spec of what we need, so we know how much the product is going to retail for, so we know what box size it's going to be in. So we give them a spec to do the initial sort of tool drawings, and how all of we do the breakdown of how the parts are laid out on the sprues. So we've got an idea of what parts we want to hold back for future releases, so we know that they need to be on a separate frame, things like that. We do as much as we can. We'll obviously, no one likes filling ejector pin marks and things like that, so we do try as much as we can to eliminate ejector pin marks in awkward positions. Sometimes we're not happy with where they are, but they have to be there because otherwise the mold won't work properly. So there's always a bit of a compromise, but we do our best. And then we're sort of looking at things like feed gate position, how the cooling system works in the tool, how the runners are laid out, so it's not too hard to get the parts off the frames. This example of the molds in the Anson. This is when they were nearly finished and they were just about to start assembling the molds properly. So you can see details like some of those black dots there. They're actually the holes that are drilled for the ejector pins. And then you can see the actual tool, the mold inserts assembled into the bolster. So that is the whole part that would be mounted up in the ejection molding machine just before I do the tool trials. And then there's the clear tool just before it's polished. With clear tools, we often get test shots that aren't polished because polishing takes such a long time. They don't want to be making changes and risk damaging that polished surface. Once the mold's made, we get to build the first test shots, which is still have to pinch myself. I get paid to build model aircraft before anyone else gets to build them. So always a very exciting day when the big DHL box turns up and we get to see what goodies we've got. So these test shots will be laid out on the table at the back there later on, so you can get some good pictures of them. Just a few pictures of when I was sat at home building test shots, because all this was done over lockdown. So yeah, my sort of 2 kids wondering what I was up to. I was sat for a week putting model aircraft together. So. But that's great because they were really interested and they wanted to get involved. So you can see quite an example of how the cockpit works and the sub-assembly of all these lovely framework.
There's no instruction sheets.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is while we're doing this, we don't have any instructions. So we're having to catalogue every part, the order in which every part goes together, so we can chat to our technical illustrator, so he can then start putting getting the CAD grabs for the instructions. Once that's all done, that all gets collated together. There's obviously leading on from here, we've got the decal design. So we're able to give the decal designer our CAD drawings so that all of the decal artwork fits properly, which leads on to our choice of schemes for this kit. So obviously A scheme, we've got the 500 squadron, that local link here. So it flew from RAF Detling, which is just up the motorway near Maidstone, not far from where I live. I think it returned back to Manston, just up the road. Sort of big bits missing out of it, I think. And we've actually put the 500 squadron actually did like a field mod, and they put some extra machine guns in the cabins, and we've included those in the kit. B scheme is an Australian aircraft, so this was done as a bit of a thank you for the guys in Australia that sent all the drawings over. And then the C scheme is so we could use the different type of windscreen. This is a training aircraft, which gives us a nice contrast to the yellow undersides on the scheme. So I've got 3 what should be lovely schemes included in the kit.
So there you go. It's hot off the press. straight to you from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Matt's presentation there of the concept, the idea, the design, everything all to do with the Avro Anson Mark 1 in 1/48 scale that's coming out to you very soon. I really do recommend it to you. I really do encourage you to go out and buy it. Airfix are really pushing the boundaries in the way in which they do their mouldings, etc., with the change in plastic to make it a little bit more harder, because that is one of our complaints, is it's really, really soft. Personally, I don't have a massive problem with it as it is, but if they can improve it, good on Airfix. So I hope you agree that the information that's been provided to you is of the best quality. I've thrown through extra bits and pieces in there for you to try and make it a little bit more interesting. Write down in the comments what you thought of the presentation, what you thought of the event, etc., and watch out obviously on the channel. There will be other videos about the R&D, about the tooling, and some very, very exclusive question and answer session with Dal, Luke, and some other people. These are the questions that you put to me to give to them. So please make sure you watch it. It's well worth the effort. And if you liked everything, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any more content. In the very near future, we have the modeller's journey coming to you. That will be predominantly with Airfix. There will be some other bits and pieces in there as well. Thank you to Airfix for helping me with that. Modeller's journey, right from the basics all the way up to the higher skill levels. So stay tuned for that, and as I said, a lot more content coming to you right now. Stay safe out there. Bye bye for now.